Well, for decades, really, the whole conversation around unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, UFOs, it was always kind of confined to the shadows, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Fringe stuff, mostly. But something's shifted.
Definitely shifted. In the last few years, I mean, the data, the conversations, it's exploded into the mainstream. You've got military pilots talking openly, high-res sensor footage.
Yeah, the Pentagon reports,
Yeah.
congressional hearings. It's a different world.
But even with all that, the core question, it still feels fundamentally unanswered, doesn't it? What are these things, these intelligent, sporadic manifestations we're observing?
It really is the ultimate mystery. And this standard default explanation, it still pretty much clings to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH.
Right, the idea that these are, well, visitors from
Yes.
distant star systems, little green men or grays or whatever.
Exactly. And look, today we really need to take a deep dive into something else, a really revolutionary alternative framework proposed by an independent researcher, Jay Alfred,
Ah, yes, Jay Alfred. And his idea.
the Inter-terrestrial hypothesis, or ETH.
Okay, inter-terrestrial. So our mission today, really, is to move beyond just, speculating wildly. We're going to try and unpack Alfred's incredibly detailed scientific structure. He calls it the dark plasma hypothesis, or DPH.
That's the plan. We want to understand not just what might be visiting us or interacting with us, but the actual physics, the how, the theoretical basis that could make these phenomena possible.
And crucially, doing it without invoking faster-than-light travel from Alpha Centauri or something equally exotic.
Precisely, because look, to really appreciate the power of Alfred's framework, we have to first face up to the huge problems with the standard extraterrestrial hypothesis. The ETH has massive limitations, logical, logistical.
It almost relies on a kind of faith, doesn't it? Less science, more belief.
You could say that. It asks us to accept some pretty extraordinary things without a solid why.
Okay, so let's start there then. The problems with ETH. The biggest one has to be just the travel.
Oh, absolutely, the sheer travel problem. If these are physical ships made of ordinary matter, baryonic matter, like our probes,
Yeah, nuts and bolts craft.
traversing interstellar space, the scale of that, the distances, it's almost impossible to comprehend within, known physics or even reasonable extensions of it. It's the first massive hurdle. We're talking stellar distances, maybe even intergalactic. I mean, think about it. Even if you assume they have technology that warps space-time a bit or gets close to light speed,
Which is already a huge assumption.
a huge assumption. The energy required to accelerate a physical object, keep it going, and then decelerate it across those voids, it's exponential. The costs, even for a civilization thousands, millions of years ahead of us, they'd be astronomical. Truly astronomical.
So it begs the question, like you said, what's the payoff? What's the return on that colossal investment?
Exactly. That's the core skepticism the ETH just can't easily overcome. The cost-benefit analysis seems way off. Why would an exponentially intelligent, super advanced civilization commit those kinds of monumental resources?
It's to peep. But watch us. Monitor a, quote, technologically primitive human civilization that hasn't even managed to properly colonize its own moon, let alone the solar system. It feels disproportionate.
The motivation, if they're really coming from far away, it just doesn't seem strong enough. But the logical inconsistency, I think, goes even deeper than the cost.
How so?
Well, think about the messages. If these entities really are visitors from a distant galaxy, why do their alleged communications, the stuff reported from UAP encounters, or even some interpretations of historical anomalies like, say, Marian apparitions, why do they consistently focus on threats specific to us, to Earth?
Right. They warn about environmental disasters, climate change hitting tipping points, and maybe most frequently, the dangers of nuclear weapons. Or nukes.
Precisely. Now, if you're an alien civilization from Andromeda, or even Proxima Centauri, why would you care? Seriously, why would the ecological destruction or nuclear self-immolation of one tiny blue-green rock orbiting an average star millions or billions of light years away, why should that matter one bit to your civilization's survival or stability?
Yeah, from their perspective, we'd be utterly insignificant. A cosmic footnote.
The ETH completely fails to provide a coherent, logical reason for this deep, persistent concern about Earth's welfare that seems to run through so many of these accounts. Assuming they're distant makes their supposed interests seem, well, illogical. Almost altruistic to an unbelievable degree.
Okay, so this is where Jay Alfred steps in. He flips the script on the location.
He introduces a compelling idea that immediately solves this motive problem. He suggests we have to shift the source of these phenomena.
Not extraterrestrial, but
Inter-terrestrial, the ITL, it asserts that the most logical, the most probable explanation is that these intelligent manifestations aren't from distant stars at all. They're from inter-terrestrial aliens.
meaning life forms that share our planet, our space.
Essentially, yes. Life forms that share our gravitational space, they inhabit a realm intertwined with ours.
And that changes everything regarding motive. Because if they share our gravitational space, their existence is fundamentally gravitationally coupled to Earth's stability.
Bingo. Our destruction, whether environmental or nuclear, would directly impact their survival. Our problems literally become their problems. They would care deeply.
So the concern makes perfect sense in that context. It's self-preservation, not inexplicable altruism from afar.
It reframes the entire discussion. We move away from the, frankly, almost religious leap of faith required by the ETH, and we ground the investigation in a logical, scientific framework focused on shared planetary dynamics.
And Alfred's core thesis, the engine behind the IHUF, which he detailed back in, 2005, 2009?
That's the dark plasma hypothesis, the DPH.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanism. The DPH postulates that our Earth, the one we see and live on, has a counterpart, a sort of shadow Earth.
A counterpart, lowest energy dark world. He calls it the alpha dark Earth.
Alpha dark Earth. And what's it made of? Not rock and water, presumably.
Yeah, it's hypothesized to be a dark matter planet, composed primarily of low-density dark plasma.
Dark plasma. Okay, we'll need to unpack that. And this alpha dark Earth, it's connected to us.
Intimately. It's gravitationally coupled to our ordinary matter Earth, and it co-rotates with us in the same orbital space around the sun.
Wow, okay. And the UAPs, the things people see.
According to the DPH, the intelligent UAPs we observe are either direct physical interactions with advanced dark plasma life forms residing there.
Biological UFOs, essentially.
Biological UFOs is Alfred's term, or perhaps even more mind-bendingly, they could be sophisticated holographic projections. Projections originating from advanced civilizations thriving on this alpha dark Earth.
Okay, let's pause there because that's a lot to take in. An entire dark plasma planet co-rotating with us, hosting life or projecting images. We need to dig into the science here. Can this framework actually hold up? What even is dark plasma?
Right, exactly. We absolutely need that robust theoretical model before we even touch the anecdotal evidence. So, dark plasma. Alfred's DPH suggests that a significant chunk of the dark matter that's near ordinary baryonic matter isn't just inert, invisible stuff.
Yeah, not just floating particles that only interact via gravity.
No. Instead, it exists in the complex, dynamic, self-interacting plasma state. It has internal structure, it has dynamics, it behaves according to plasma physics, just like the ordinary plasma we study in stars or fusion reactors, but it's made of dark matter constituents.
Okay, so it's active. And these dynamics plus gravity lead to the formation of dark Earth, plural.
Yes. The idea is that these self-interacting dark plasma spheres naturally coalesce under gravity to form dark matter planets. These are gravitationally coupled to their ordinary matter counterparts, like our Earth, and they co-rotate. Alfred actually posits a series of these dark Earths, nested at different energy levels.
A series of them.
Potentially. But the phenomena we're primarily interested in, the UAPs, the interactions, Alfred suggests they originate mainly from the lowest energy one, this alpha dark Earth.
Now, hang on. If this alpha dark Earth is orbiting right here with us, and you mentioned Alfred suggests it could be, as large as Jupiter, albeit tenuous.
Yes, large but very low density, like a vast gas giant's atmosphere.
Okay, but even tenuous, if it's Jupiter-sized, why haven't our most sensitive gravitational measurements detected its influence separately? Wouldn't something that big, even if low density, mess with orbits or show up somehow? That feels like a major hurdle.
It's the absolutely essential question, you're right. And Alfred's framework provides a really quite brilliant, almost retrospective answer. It comes down to a historical oversight he calls mass conflation.
Mass conflation, meaning?
Meaning that when we first determined Earth's mass with high precision, using Newtonian gravity, measuring orbital periods, gravitational pulls, that sort of thing.
Standard orbital mechanics.
Yes, exactly. Those methods were only sensitive to the total gravitational mass. They measured the sum of the ordinary matter, the baryonic mass we see, and any dark matter that was gravitationally bound within the same system.
Ah. So the scientists doing those measurements, back then, they likely had no idea dark matter even needed to be considered as a separate component. The number they got for Earth's mass just included both?
Precisely. The recorded mass simply absorbed the dark matter component without anyone realizing it. If our Earth, the Sun, Jupiter, all contain significant amounts of coupled dark matter internally, They would still follow Newton's laws perfectly because the measurements just gave us the combined gravitational weight. The laws still worked, but the interpretation of what was being weighed was incomplete.
Okay, that's clever. But is there any actual evidence that Earth does contain a significant dark matter component internally, not just orbiting, but inside?
Well, this is where it gets really compelling. Recent data, independent of UAP research, provides constraints suggesting this internal dark matter component is very real and potentially quite large.
What kind of data are we talking about?
We're looking at analyses of atmospheric neutrino oscillations, particularly data gathered by huge, sensitive detectors like IceCube at the South Pole and Super Kamiokande in Japan.
Neutrinos. How do they tell us about dark matter in the Earth?
Neutrinos are fascinating because they interact so weakly they can pass right through the Earth. But they do interact occasionally, and how they oscillate change flavors as they pass through matter depends on the density and type of matter they encounter. By studying the patterns of neutrinos coming through the Earth versus those coming straight down from the atmosphere, scientists can model the Earth's internal density profile.
And those models suggest?
The model suggests that to best fit the observed oscillation patterns, dark matter needs to be included within the Earth. Some analyses indicate that dark matter might account for somewhere between, say, 21% to 24% of the Earth's total mass.
Wow, nearly a quarter.
And potentially even more concentrated in the core. Maybe up to 30% of the core's mass could be dark matter.
20 to 30% of our planet's mass possibly being dark matter. That is highly significant.
Okay, yeah, that would absolutely be enough to gravitationally support the existence of a series of these coupled, tenuous dark Earths, including this Jupiter-sized but low-density alpha dark Earth.
That internal dark matter component is really the key anchor for the whole concept. The alpha dark Earth itself is tenuous, low density, but vast. And crucially, Alfred proposes it's capable of hosting life specifically, life adapted to that environment. Tenuous, radiation-like plasma life forms.
And because these dark Earths are gravitationally coupled to our ordinary matter Earth,
They share the same space, effectively. Their habitable zones, their environments can intersect or overlap.
and that intersection is the doorway.
Correct. That's the pathway. It allows for occasional intersector visitations, as Alfred calls them. These plasma life forms aren't crossing vast interstellar distances. They're essentially our neighbors, just operating in a different phase, maybe. A different sector of reality, sharing our magnetic and gravitational well. So their movement isn't radial across galaxies, but more like vertical or lateral within this shared plasmasphere.
Exactly. They're moving between coupled sectors right here.
Okay, so we have a potential location in the alpha dark Earth and a reason for them to be interested in us. But the next huge challenge for the DPH has to be visibility, right? If these things are made of dark plasma, which by definition barely interacts with light or ordinary matter, how do we see them? How do they show up on radar?
Yeah, that's the crux of it. How does the invisible become visible? It requires a specific, powerful, and importantly, a controlled mechanism for interaction. Alfred calls this dark ionization.
Dark ionization. Okay, break that down.
So a dark plasma life form, even when it's just chilling in its relaxed state, it's already naturally many, many orders of magnitude denser than the ambient dark matter just floating around in space.
Right, it's a concentration of dark matter.
Exactly. Now, to interact with our sector, to become visible or tangible, it initiates a physical process. Alfred describes it as a kind of pumping action.
A pumping action, like squeezing itself.
Sort of, yes. The life form actively, significantly reduces its internal volume. It compresses itself.
Okay, and when you reduce volume, density goes way up.
Way up, dramatically. And when the density increases that much, the average distance between the dark matter particles inside the life form shrinks considerably.
Which means they're much more likely to collide with each other and, crucially,
Much more likely to have forceful collisions with the ordinary matter atoms and molecules in the air around the life form. The compression increases the interaction cross-section, essentially.
Okay, so this pumping action forces interaction with the surrounding air, and these collisions.
They're energetic enough. Remember, this dark plasma body is dense. These collisions can knock electrons and even protons right out of our ordinary air molecules, nitrogen, oxygen, xenon, etc.
And knocking electrons out is ionization.
Exactly. This results in the sudden but transient generation of an envelope, a shell of ordinary cold, non-thermal plasma that forms around the dark plasma life form.
Ah, okay. So The UAP itself, the dark body inside, isn't glowing. It's the air around it that's being lit up, ionized by the dark body's compression.
Precisely. That's a critical distinction, and Alfred calls it cold plasma for a reason.
Why cold? Plasma sounds hot.
Well, plasma generated by heat, like in the sun or a fusion reactor, is incredibly hot thermal plasma. But this kind of plasma is generated by direct kinetic energy transfer particles literally bumping electrons off. It's not a runaway thermal reaction heating the whole gas. The overall average temperature of the gas remains much cooler. Think more like the plasma inside a neon sign or an aurora. Still plasma, still emitting light, but not thermonuclear hot.
Got it. Non-thermal. But even in this cold state, the energy being released is what we actually detect, right? That's the UAP signature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When those displaced electrons inevitably fall back to lower energy states or recombine with the ionized atoms, they have to release that energy, and they do so in ways we can detect.
Yeah.
Like photons. That's the visible light we see. Heat in the form of infrared and microwaves, which our sensors pick up. And electromagnetic fields, strong, localized EM disturbances are very commonly reported around UAPs. Even weak electrical currents can be generated. Basically, the entire observable UAP phenomenon stems from this temporary shell of ordinary plasma.
Okay, this is starting to make sense of the visual sightings, but here's where Alfred's theory gets really powerful, right? It explains the most baffling UAP behaviors appearing from nowhere, vanishing instantly, changing shape or reflectivity.
Exactly, because the dark plasma life form isn't just creating this plasma shell, it's controlling it. It essentially uses its own internal density as a dial, a switch, to control a visibility gate.
And that gate is linked to the plasma itself.
It's determined by the plasma frequency of that ordinary matter envelope it generates. The plasma frequency is a fundamental property of any plasma, related to its density. By controlling its own internal density through that pumping action, and thus the number of particles interacting, the life form precisely controls the density of the ordinary plasma shell it creates.
And controlling the plasma density controls its plasma frequency.
Which in turn dictates how that plasma shell interacts with electromagnetic waves, including visible light and radar. It's like tuning a radio receiver, but for visibility itself.
Okay, walk us through the key modes. How does this gate work?
All right, let's take the most common sightings, the bright, shiny, metallic-looking objects. Alfred calls this the arc glow mode. This happens when the life form pumps itself up dense enough that the plasma frequency of the ordinary plasma shell becomes greater than the frequency of the ambient light hitting it.
Higher frequency plasma reflects lower frequency light.
Exactly. So it reflects sunlight, moonlight, whatever ambient light is around. This makes the object look shiny, metallic, maybe mirror-like, or just intensely bright. If they really crank up the density, the plasma frequency gets extremely high, resulting in that super intense brightness witnesses sometimes describe as being like a welding torch. That's the arc mode. And crucially, this high-frequency plasma shell also reflects radar waves.
Okay, so that explains the classic solid-looking radar-reflecting UFO. Now, how do they vanish? Instantly.
That's the transparent mode. The life form just relaxes slightly. It reduces its internal density just enough so that the plasma frequency of the ordinary shell drops below the frequency of ambient light.
And when the plasma frequency is lower,
the light passes right through. The plasma envelope essentially becomes transparent, acting maybe like a weak refractive lens. The object disappears from visual sight. And just as importantly, radar waves also pass straight through. It vanishes from sensors, too.
Wow. And could that refractive lens effect explain some weird visual distortions? People sometimes report the background looking warped or blurry around the object just before it disappears.
Absolutely. If the refractive index of that plasma lens deviates slightly from that of air, it would bend the light passing through or around the dark body inside, producing exactly those kinds of strange, distorted, shimmering or blurring images of the background environment.
Okay, one more mode. What about the really unsettling sightings? The black triangles, the tic-tac the pilots described as a solid shape but totally black, non-reflective, almost absorbing light.
Right, the shadowy objects. That's the dark mode. This occurs, Alfred suggests, when the life form tunes its density perfectly so that the plasma frequency of the shell becomes exactly equal to the frequency of the ambient light.
The resonant frequency.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Resonance. In this state, maximum resonant absorption occurs. The plasma shell literally absorbs the light energy hitting it instead of reflecting or transmitting it. So the object appears dark, black, like a hole in space, perfectly non-reflective.
And radar.
Same principle. It would absorb radar frequencies, too, explaining why radar tracks can sometimes mysteriously vanish even if pilots still have visual contact with a dark shape. It just stops reflecting the radar waves.
So the key to their seeming ability to defy inertia, their instantaneous appearances, disappearances, and changes in reflectivity. It's not propulsion in the way we think of it. It's simply controlling this plasma density switch, pumping up or relaxing down.
Exactly. It's a form of dynamic camouflage, or maybe active signature management, rooted in controllable plasma physics, not necessarily in exotic propulsion that overcomes g-forces. When they relax the density sufficiently, the ordinary plasma shell dissipates almost instantly. It's inherently unstable, and the underlying dark plasma component becomes invisible again. Poof.
Mind-blowing. Before we move on, though, you mentioned Alfred provides another alternative pathway to visibility, one that doesn't need the energy cost of creating a full plasma envelope.
Yes, it's called kinetic mixing. This is a
Yep.
bit more theoretical, deep physics territory.
Okay, give us the basic.
It's rooted in an analogy with how neutrinos oscillate, how they change type. The theory suggests that certain dark matter particles, hypothesized ones like axions or perhaps dark photons, might be able to cyclically convert directly into ordinary photons, light, under specific conditions.
Transformation, dark particle becomes light particle.
Sort of, yeah, a conversion. And this conversion is thought to be enhanced particularly when these dark particles encounter strong, resonant magnetic fields. It's like there's a specific portal, an axion dark photon conversion channel that can open up.
And how does this explain UAP sightings?
It could explain a very specific and quite puzzling class of sighting, the ones where something is captured clearly on film or infrared sensors or radar, but the actual human observers present saw nothing with their naked eyes.
Ah, the instrument detects it, but the eye doesn't.
Exactly. The idea is that this kinetic mixing process might only produce a very small number of ordinary photons, not enough for the human eye to register in real time. But a camera sensor, or an IR detector, integrates the signal over time. It slowly accumulates those few converted ordinary photons, building up an image, so the instrument sees the entity even when the human eye can't. It's a much more passive form of detection, potentially requiring less energy expenditure from the dark plasma entity than full-blown dark ionization. Okay, so if dark ionization is the main engine for making these things visible and interactive, we still need to talk about efficiency. Because, standard physics, it tells us that the main way dark matter interacts with ordinary matter, besides gravity, is through the weak nuclear force. And the weak force is, well, weak. Famously weak. Extremely weak and very short range. For Alfred's dark ionization mechanism to be robust enough, efficient enough to create these dense plasma shields almost instantly just by compressing, well, relying only on the weak force seems like a stretch. We probably need a stronger interaction pathway, a better portal between the dark and ordinary sectors.
And this brings us to the hunt, both theoretical and experimental, for something else. I hypothesized fifth force of nature.
Exactly. And this search isn't just happening in the context of UAP research, far from it. Astrophysicists have been looking for evidence of non-gravitational interactions between dark and ordinary matter for ages.
Why? What are the clues from space?
Well, one example is the distribution of dark matter in galaxies. It tends to settle into what's called a maximum entropy distribution, kind of smoothed out. For it to reach that state, the dark matter must have interacted and exchanged energy somehow, either colliding with itself or with ordinary matter. Gravity alone doesn't seem sufficient to explain this thermalization. So astrophysicists theorize there must be some other interaction, likely mediated by new force-carrying particles, which they broadly call dark bosons.
Okay, so there's a theoretical need for something more, but has anything actually been found experimentally?
This is where the story gets really exciting. It seems there has been, quite accidentally, starting around 2015, by a group at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences Institute for Nuclear Research, Atomemkaya.
The Hungarian group, what did they find?
It's a fascinating case of serendipity. A team led by Attila Krasznahorkai was studying standard nuclear physics specifically, the decays of certain excited atomic nuclei, and they noticed anomalies, repeated, highly unusual patterns in these decays that just didn't fit the standard model of particle physics.
Anomalies how?
These anomalies strongly suggested the existence of a completely new particle, a boson, that wasn't predicted by the standard model. They tentatively dubbed it the X17 or X17 particle because its estimated mass was around 17 mega-electron volts, or MeV.
Okay, detail the experiment a bit. What was the weird pattern they saw?
So in their initial key experiment, they were firing protons at a lithium-7 target. This collision created an unstable, excited state of a beryllium-8 nucleus. Now, this excited beryllium-8 nucleus has to decay, release its extra energy. One way it can do this is by emitting a high-energy photon, which can then internally convert into a pair of particles, an electron and its antiparticle, a positron.
Okay, standard process.
Right. And standard physics predicts that this electron-positron pair should usually fly off, separating at a very small angle relative to each other. But the ATOM KI team kept seeing a significant bump in their data, an excess of pairs separating at an unexpectedly wide angle, around 140 degrees.
140 degrees, that's almost backwards. Why would they do that?
The only plausible explanation they could find was that the excited beryllium-8 nucleus wasn't just emitting a photon. Instead, it was momentarily creating a new, previously unknown particle, the X-17, which carried away the energy. This lightweight X-17 particle then almost immediately decayed into the electron-positron pair, and because of the kinematics of that decay, the pair shot off at that characteristic wide angle.
Wow. So the wide angle was the signature of this fleeting intermediate particle. Was it a one-off, though? A fluke?
That's what everyone wondered. But no, the team meticulously repeated the experiment. And then, crucially, they observed the same anomalous bump, the same signature, in completely different nuclear transitions, first involving excited helium-4 nuclei, and later in carbon-12 decays as well. The pattern held across multiple types of nuclei.
Okay, multiple conformations. That makes it much harder to dismiss.
Much harder. By 2019, after intense scrutiny and theoretical work by others, the calculated statistical significance was huge. The chance of this specific angular anomaly being just a random fluctuation within standard physics was estimated at less than 1 in a trillion. It provides very strong evidence for the X-17 as a genuine new particle, a new force carrier.
Okay, we have strong evidence for X-17. What does it do? What are the physics implications for our non-physicist listeners here? It's hypothesized to be a vector boson.
Right, a vector boson is simply a type of fundamental particle that acts as a carrier for a force, like the photon carries the electromagnetic force, or the W and Z bosons carry the weak force, or gluons carry the strong force. The X-17 is proposed to be the carrier particle for a new fifth fundamental force.
A fifth force. What kind of force? Strong, weak, long range, short range?
It's believed to be a very short-range attractive force.
How short is short range here?
Unimaginably short. Calculations suggest its effective range is only about 10 femtometers.
Femtometers. Give us a sense of scale.
A femtometer is 10 to the minus 15 meters, 1/4,000,000th of a meter. So this force basically only operates effectively within the dimensions of a single atomic nucleus. Its influence drops off incredibly rapidly beyond that tiny distance. That proximity is absolutely critical.
Okay, short range. And what makes this particular force particle, the X-17, so potentially perfect for bridging the dark matter sector and our ordinary matter sector?
This is the key insight. Theoretical modeling suggests that the X-17 boson interacts differently with different particles. It's thought to couple, or interact, much more strongly with neutrons and electrons, but only very weakly with protons.
Ah, so it prefers neutrons and electrons over protons.
Yes, this selectivity is crucial. It could explain why this force wasn't easily detected in many previous high-energy physics experiments, which often focus on proton collisions, like at the LHC. If it barely interacts with protons, it would have been much harder to spot.
Okay, so this provides the mechanism Alfred needed. This fifth force, mediated by the X-17, acts as a new, more efficient portal for interaction between dark matter and ordinary matter, especially at very close range. It's the plasma glue.
That's a great way to put it. It's a short-range attractive force, separate from the weak force's Z boson pathway, that could significantly enhance the efficiency of the dark ionization process. Remember the pumping action. When the dark plasma life forms compress themselves, reducing their volume and dramatically increasing their density, this brings their constituent dark particles incredibly close to the ordinary matter nuclei, especially the neutrons within them, and the electrons in the surrounding air. At that femtometer range, this attractive fifth force kicks in strongly.
So it actively helps pull the particles together for collision.
It significantly boosts the likelihood and effectiveness of the collisions needed to knock out electrons and ionize the ordinary matter. It acts as the catalyst that makes the dark ionization efficient enough to happen quickly and generate those dense plasma sheaths.
And this fifth force does something else too, right? It helps explain the feeling or appearance of solidity.
Yes, absolutely. Alfred suggests this short-range attractive force allows the dense dark plasma body, when compressed, to physically attract and hold on to ordinary matter particles, atoms, molecules, dust, right at its boundary. It creates a kind of thin, constantly renewed veneer or coating of ordinary matter around the dark plasma form.
A physical layer, however tenuous.
Exactly. And this veneer, maintained by the fifth force attraction at close range, is crucial for explaining several other puzzling phenomena.
Like the sensation of touch in close encounters.
Precisely. The dark plasma body itself might not be touchable, but via this ordinary matter veneer, it could register physical contact with, say, a human body, or the ground, or an object, and vice versa. We might feel contact with the veneer.
It could also explain sounds on impact. People sometimes report hearing a thud or a metallic clang when one of these things supposedly lands or hits something, even if it looks ethereal.
Yes. The veneer, being made of ordinary matter, could generate sound waves upon impact with a hard surface, explaining those low-level impact sounds. It's not the dark plasma making the noise, but it's temporary ordinary matter coating.
And visually, this veneer helps with the appearance of solidity, too.
Definitely. Even if the dark plasma itself is invisible, the reflection of ordinary photons, sunlight, etc., bouncing off this thin veneer of ordinary matter, could make the life form momentarily visible to our eyes, giving it the appearance of having a surface, a structure. Before it perhaps relaxes its density, the veneer dissipates, and it shifts back into the transparent mode. All right, so we've built up the core physics, the possibility of a co-rotating dark Earth, the dark ionization mechanism for visibility, and the X-17 fifth force providing the necessary interaction efficiency and the physical veneer. Now we can systematically apply this DPH model to explain those specific weird anomalous signatures that have baffled UAP investigators for so long.
Okay, let's do it. Where do we start? The official studies themselves often point towards plasma, right? Even the conventional ones.
They do. You mentioned the British Ministry of Defense study, Project Condign, running from 96 to 2000. Its final report, although controversial, concluded that the majority of sightings were likely misidentified ordinary plasma phenomena, things like unusual atmospheric plasma, ball lightning generated by meteors, that kind of thing.
But Alfred's point is that while ordinary plasma explains some sightings, the really bizarre stuff, the intelligently controlled behavior, the non-inertial movement, that points beyond ordinary plasma.
Exactly. That points towards these dark plasma life forms, using ordinary plasma as a temporary tool via dark ionization. So let's look at the specific signatures, starting with the lights and colors.
Right. Witnesses almost always report light. Often the entire object seems wrapped in a glow or a haze, which, as you said, we now understand is likely the ionized air around the object, not lights on the object.
Correct. The light source is the interaction zone. And the specific colors reported actually give us clues about the energy level of that interaction based on the composition of our air. Well, the ionization process will naturally start with a gas in the air that has the lowest ionization energy, the easiest one to knock electrons off of. In our atmosphere, that gas is xenon. It's a trace gas, but it's there.
Xenon. And what color does ionized xenon produce?
At its lowest excitation levels, xenon ionization produces a characteristic brilliant blue, or luminous blue light. And interestingly, that specific blue color is very frequently reported in UAP sightings, especially daytime sightings, where presumably the entity only needs to generate the minimum energy required to become visible against the bright sky.
Fascinating. So the blue color points to low energy ionization of xenon. What about other colors or when it gets brighter?
As the dark plasma life form increases its compression, that pumping action, the energy of the collisions ramps up. This higher energy can then ionize other, more abundant gases like nitrogen and oxygen, or excite the existing plasma to higher energy states. This leads to changes in color, often transitioning through greens, yellows, oranges, reds, or towards white as multiple emission lines combine.
And what about those accounts of incredibly intense light? People describing it like looking into a welding torch or something painfully bright.
That, Alfred suggests, is the life form rapidly shifting into the high-density arc mode we talked about earlier. It signals that it has maximized its compression, driving the plasma frequency of the ordinary sheath incredibly high. This often seems to happen moments before it performs an instantaneous acceleration or zooms off into the distance. It's like powering up the shield to maximum before making a move.
Okay, lights and colors make sense within this framework. What about the sounds? Witnesses often describe things that aren't necessarily deafening, but are deeply unnerving. A low hum, a high-pitched buzz, sometimes a rumbling.
Right, the acoustic phenomena. The initial dark ionization process itself, as it rapidly heats and displaces the air in that envelope, generates thermal shock waves. These propagate outwards and would be heard as low-frequency rumbling sounds, similar to distant thunder, often reported just before or during a sighting.
Okay, that explains the external rumbling. But what about the sound people sometimes report hearing inside their own head? That weird buzzing or high-pitched whine that nobody else hears, that's always sounded very subjective.
It sounds subjective, but the DPH offers a potential physical explanation. Remember that dark ionization releases energy across the spectrum, including microwaves.
Like in a microwave oven.
Exactly like that. Microwaves are very good at penetrating and heating materials containing water, including soft biological tissues. Alfred proposes that the microwaves generated by the UAP's plasma sheath can penetrate the skull and directly heat the fluids within the inner ear and potentially the brain itself.
Heating the inner ear fluid.
Yes. This rapid, localized heating creates tiny thermoelastic pressure waves, shock waves, within the tissue and fluid. These vibrations can then travel via bone conduction directly to the auditory nerve endings in the inner ear.
So the brain interprets these physically induced vibrations as sound, even though no sound wave entered the ear canal.
Precisely. It's an internal, non-auditory perception of sound. The Frey effect, or microwave auditory effect, is a known phenomenon. This could perfectly explain the subjective buzzing or humming heard only by the witness close to the UAP.
That's a really significant potential explanation. It takes something often dismissed as psychological or telepathic and grounds it in physics microwave interactions.
It grounds the experience in physical plasma dynamics, yes. And there are other related effects. The sudden expansion of the air volume within that plasma envelope due to ionization also causes bulk air movement, what witnesses might perceive as electric winds or ionic winds.
A sudden breeze from nowhere.
Exactly. People often report feeling a sudden chill or a light breeze blowing, even on still day, just prior to or during a UAP sighting. This has also been noted in historical accounts, like some Marian apparitions descriptions. It's likely the physical displacement of air by the rapidly forming plasma sheath.
Okay, lights, internal sounds, air movement. What about smells? There are often reports of distinctive, sharp, sometimes metallic or chemical odors near landing sites or after close encounters.
Yes, the olfactory phenomena. These are also likely direct chemical byproducts of the intense high-energy ionization process happening in the air.
Like what kind of chemicals?
The most common one expected would be ozone, O3. Ozone is a triple oxygen molecule formed naturally during high electrical discharges, like lightning or around high-voltage equipment. It has that distinctive, sharp, clean, almost metallic smell. That's probably the most frequently reported UAP-associated odor.
Okay, ozone makes sense. Anything else?
Well, the intense energy can also break the strong triple bond in atmospheric nitrogen, N2, allowing it to react. Nitrogen can be excited to metastable states and then combine with hydrogen from water vapor or oxygen to form compounds like ammonia, NH3, or various nitric oxides and NOx. These also have distinctive pungent or sharp smells.
And Alfred mentions one particularly alarming possibility.
Yes. If nitrogen dioxide, NO2, is produced, it could potentially react with certain organic compounds present in the air, like benzene from pollution or natural sources, to form nitrobenzene.
Nitrobenzene, what's that?
It's an oily yellowish substance with a very strong smell, often described as being like bitter almonds or shoe polish. And the smell of bitter almonds is often associated with cyanide compounds.
So, potentially toxic.
Potentially quite toxic, yes. The smell itself signals a potent chemical byproduct generated locally by the UAP's ionization field. It's a sobering thought that a seemingly visual event, like a UAP sighting, might actually involve the localized generation of harmful chemical compounds right there in the air.
It really drives home that these aren't just passive light shows. We treat sightings as mainly visual, but the DPH suggests it's potentially a full sensory assault. Light, internal sound, external sound, smells, thermal effects, physical air movement.
It implies a localized, sometimes quite violent, disruption of the ordinary matter environment immediately around the dark plasma entity.
Okay, let's tackle maybe the biggest conceptual hurdle for many people, the appearance of solidity. If this is fundamentally plasma, why do experienced observers, like military pilots, often describe structured, seemingly metallic objects, things with sharp edges, defined shapes, apparent mass? How can plasma look and act solid?
Yeah, that's a common misunderstanding. The idea that plasma, because it's a gas of charged particles, can't appear solid is simply incorrect. First off, think about metals in solid-state physics. The electrons in a metal form a kind of plasma, electron gas. So solidity and plasma aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay, fair point. But more relevantly,
Consider natural plasma phenomena like ball lightning. These are typically grapefruit-sized spheres of luminous plasma, and while they seem ethereal, they are known to interact physically. There are credible reports of ball lightning bouncing off surfaces, rolling along floors, melting glass, leaving scorch marks, holes, and even small furrows in the ground upon contact.
So even small plasma balls can have tangible physical effects.
Definitely. Alfred argues that these biological UFOs, the dark plasma life forms, are essentially much larger, more stable, and vastly more dense versions of natural ball lightning. They are highly organized plasma structures.
And because they are dense and likely generate strong internal magnetic fields.
They can easily deflect electromagnetic waves,
No.
including radio waves and radar, giving them that appearance of being a solid, rigid, highly reflective object on sensors. They present a hard radar return.
Plus, we have the fifth force veneer.
Absolutely. We must not forget that thin coating of ordinary matter attracted by the fifth force. That veneer provides the actual physical interface. It's the skin of the object that can be touched, that can reflect ordinary photons, giving it visual structure, and they can generate sound upon impact. The combination of the dense plasma core and the ordinary matter veneer creates the illusion of a solid, structured craft.
Okay. What about physical traces left behind, besides scorch marks? Things like angel hair, that weird wispy cobweb-like stuff sometimes reported floating down after a sighting, or ectoplasm in older accounts.
Alfred suggests that's likely the residual ordinary plasma cloud. After the dark plasma entity inside has deionized the air, relaxed its density, or moved away, the transient ordinary plasma sheath doesn't vanish instantly. It lingers for a short time, cooling and recombining.
And it interacts with the environment.
Yes. This cooling, weakly ionized gas can interact with ambient moisture, water vapor, and dust particles in the air. This could cause them to clump together electrostatically, forming those light, fibrous, web-like structures, angel hair, which then slowly dissipate as the charge neutralizes and the moisture evaporates. It's essentially a short-lived atmospheric precipitate triggered by the plasma interaction.
Okay, that makes sense too. Finally, let's apply this to the most controversial, most sensitive aspect of the phenomenon: alleged alien abductions. How does the DPH framework address those? Alfred suggests they're typically not physical kidnappings of the person's ordinary matter body, right?
That seems to be his interpretation, yes. He proposes that these intensely strange and often traumatic experiences are far more likely related to an interaction primarily involving the consciousness associated with the lowest energy alpha dark plasma body, the component of our own being that is fundamentally coupled to our ordinary physical body.
So it's an interaction targeting our dark self, not our physical self.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
This would elegantly explain several persistent mysteries of abduction accounts. Why victims often show no physical signs of having been transported anywhere, no missing time on external clocks, no physical evidence of restraint or medical procedures despite vivid memories.
And the communication. Abductees often report telepathic communication, not spoken words.
Exactly. If the interaction is occurring primarily within the dark plasma sector, communication would likely take the form of direct information transfer, perhaps acoustic or electromagnetic signals interacting directly with the consciousness substrate, which we would interpret as telepathy. We already discussed how microwaves can create perceived sound internally. This could be a related mechanism.
And Alfred notes correlations with other states of consciousness.
Yes, he and other researchers have pointed out the striking similarities in the phenomenology, the types of experiences reported between alleged abductions and other non-ordinary states, like spontaneous out-of-body experiences, OBEs, or near-death experiences, NDEs. Common themes include floating sensations, passing through walls, encounters with beings of light, life reviews, etc.
And the DPH suggests these all might stem from the same underlying mechanism.
Alfred proposes that all these phenomena, OBEs, NDEs, perhaps some aspects of abduction experiences, might be comprehensively explained through the dynamics of consciousness residing or operating within the dark plasma sphere, particularly the alpha dark plasma body. These states might be triggered by trauma, physiological stress, external electromagnetic fields, like those from a UAP, or other factors that temporarily shift the locus of awareness away from the physical body towards its dark plasma counterpart. So if we accept the possibility of this alpha dark Earth, this co-rotating dark plasma world, we have to think about the nature of life there. What are these advanced plasma life forms actually like? Alfred describes them based on sightings often appearing as, well, plasmoids, discrete blobs of plasma, or as vortexes, swirling energy patterns, sometimes even as highly stable, coherent beams of light.
So not little gray men in suits, more
Yeah.
like energy beings.
Fundamentally, yes. They might resemble, in their basic structure, giant unicellular organisms like amoebas or paramecia made of plasma. but their potential for controlled growth seems almost unlimited within their environment.
This reminds me of those old, fascinating speculations by Carl Sagan and Edwin Salpeter back in the 70s. They theorized about life in Jupiter's atmosphere.
Exactly. The hypothetical Jovian floaters, huge balloon-like organisms drifting in the clouds and the hunters that preyed on them. Sagan and Salpeter imagined life adapting to a dense, gaseous, turbulent environment.
And Alfred is suggesting something similar for the dark Earth's plasma ocean or atmosphere.
It's a compelling conceptual link. These dark plasma life forms could potentially grow to be truly enormous, much larger than any biological organism on ordinary Earth. By ingesting ambient particles, dark or ordinary, and carefully adjusting their internal density, they could achieve buoyancy and size equilibrium within their plasma environment.
And if one of these gargantuan entities were to briefly become visible to us via dark ionization,
It could easily be mistaken for a majestic, colossal mothership, a single massive entity, not necessarily a constructed vehicle.
okay, let's talk about behavior. We see a lot of footage now, especially military footage, showing coordinated swarm behavior. Multiple lights, often colored orbs, moving together in highly complex, non-random pattern formations. How does the DPH account for that?
Swarm behavior is actually quite natural within a plasma environment. The key lies in the electromagnetic interactions between the ordinary cold plasma sheaths that temporarily surround each individual dark plasma life form when they become visible.
So the visible shells interact.
Yes, these charged plasma envelopes will exert forces on each other: attraction, repulsion, alignment with local magnetic fields. This allows the individuals within the group to move collectively, maintaining formations and executing coordinated maneuvers seemingly without direct communication, simply by responding to the shared electromagnetic environment they create.
Okay, that makes sense for swarms. But Alfred suggests something even more advanced, the potential to form temporary superorganisms.
That's right. This goes beyond just swarming. He proposes that in certain situations, perhaps when facing a threat or needing to perform a complex task, or maybe even for predation, these individual plasma life forms can do more than just coordinate. They can rapidly congregate and temporarily merge or coalesce.
Merge into a single entity?
Essentially, yes. They could pool their plasma, merge their density fields and their surrounding ordinary plasma envelopes to form what appears to us as a single, larger, often structured entity. It's like individual cells temporarily coming together to form a multicellular organism, but with plasma beings.
So they could effectively form a spaceship shape collectively when needed.
That's the idea. A collective vehicle assembled on the fly from individual units, which can then disaggregate back into a swarm later. It's a very alien concept of biological organization.
Now let's get to the really mind-bending part, their movement. The instantaneous acceleration, the impossible right-angle turns, the apparent total disregard for inertia and aerodynamics, that's what breaks our conventional physics brains. How does the DPH explain propulsion?
Well, crucially, their movement isn't primarily about aerodynamics in our atmosphere. It's highly sophisticated precisely because it utilizes the physics of their environment, the magnetohydrodynamic (MHD) environment of the dark Earth, which is mostly invisible and impenetrable to us.
Magnetohydrodynamics, the physics of electrically conducting fluids, like plasma, interacting with magnetic fields.
Exactly. They likely use a combination of techniques optimized for navigating a dense plasma ocean permeated by magnetic fields. This includes electrical propulsion and plasma-based hydrodynamics.
Okay, electrical propulsion, how might that work?
These entities can likely control their net electrical charge very precisely, maybe neutralizing it or even reversing it almost instantly. This would allow them to interact strongly with ambient electric and magnetic fields. They could use the Earth's magnetic field lines for guidance and propulsion. They might generate their own localized fields for thrust, perhaps using principles similar to plasma thrusters or ion drives, but vastly more advanced. They could potentially even ride on natural phenomena like Birkeland currents.
Birkeland currents, what are those?
They are huge, sheet-like currents of electrical charge that flow along magnetic field lines, connecting the Earth's magnetosphere to the ionosphere, especially near the poles. They carry immense energy. If these plasma life forms could tap into or ride these currents,
It would be like hopping onto a natural planetary-scale magnetic levitation train system.
exactly, providing highways for rapid, effortless transit within the coupled plasmasphere.
And what about the hydrodynamics? You mentioned squids earlier.
Right. Within their own dense plasma environment, they could also use more conventional, for them, hydrodynamic principles. By rapidly shifting their internal density or expelling plasma, they could create suction and thrust, propelling themselves efficiently through their plasma ocean or atmosphere, much like a squid pumps water to move.
So when we see these movements superimposed against our sky, our frame of reference, they look impossible because they're optimized for a completely different physical medium and set of forces.
Precisely. They aren't fighting our air resistance or gravity in the same way a physical aircraft would have to. They're navigating their own world, which just happens to overlap ours.
Okay, so we have the biological UFOs, the living plasma entities, the swarms, the potential superorganisms moving via MHD. But what about the classic image, the nuts and bolts flying saucer, the structured craft? Does the DPH have room for actual manufactured vehicles, or does Alfred offer a different explanation?
This is where Alfred puts forward perhaps his most radical and maybe most controversial proposal, the concept of plasma thought holograms.
Thought holograms. Okay, unpack that.
He suggests that many sightings, perhaps especially those involving classic structured spaceship imagery, might not be physical objects at all, nor even the biological UFOs we just discussed. Instead, they could be projections,
Oh.
ethereal plasma holograms.
Holograms made of plasma. Generated by whom, or what?
Here's the core idea. Alfred posits that these holograms are literally crystallized, formed within the substance of the alpha dark Earth, drawing their structure from the collective consciousness of humanity.
Wait, our thoughts are creating UFO images in the dark Earth.
That's the hypothesis. Think about the trillions upon trillions of thought waves, images, ideas, and expectations about alien spaceships that humanity broadcasts constantly, day in and day out, through our minds, our media, our fiction. Alfred suggests that our own consciousness, residing partly in our coupled dark plasma bodies, projects these thoughts into the shared dark sector.
And the alpha dark Earth acts like a medium, a canvas.
A receptive medium, yes.
Right.
These persistent, collectively reinforced thought forms could impress themselves onto the dark plasma, creating semi-stable holographic patterns. And if these patterns are then momentarily energized, perhaps accompanied by a burst of ordinary plasma generated via dark ionization or kinetic mixing,
They become visible to us
Lisa,
as
But-
structured craft.
they could appear to our ordinary sight and even potentially on radar as seemingly real structured objects matching our cultural archetypes of what an alien ship should look like.
So the classic 1947 flying saucer shape, the triangles, the cigars, these might be reflections of our own expectations, made temporarily manifest.
It's a feedback loop, potentially. We imagine them, project them, and under certain conditions, the dark plasma environment reflects those images back to us, energized just enough to be perceived.
Yeah.
This could also explain why the types of UFO shapes reported often seem to evolve over time, mirroring the popular imagery in science fiction and media of the era.
That's a wild idea. But is there any grounding for it? Any parallel?
Well, Alfred draws a parallel to emerging human technology.
Yeah.
He points out, for instance, reports about the U.S. Navy developing systems that use powerful lasers to ionize specific points in the air, creating localized bursts of ordinary plasma.
Plasma decoys.
Exactly. These laser-induced plasma points can apparently be manipulated to generate transient but realistic ghost images on enemy radar and other sensors, making it look like multiple aircraft are present when they aren't. They can create temporary, illusory plasma UFOs to confuse sensors.
So if our current technology can create rudimentary plasma holograms as decoys,
Then it seems plausible that an exponentially advanced civilization, or even just the physics of a coupled dark plasma environment responding to collective consciousness, could generate far more sophisticated and convincing plasma thought holograms.
okay. This brings us back then full circle to the human connection. If our thoughts can influence that realm, can we perceive it directly? You mentioned dark sight.
Yes. Alfred argues that because every human possesses this dark plasma component, this alpha dark plasma body, coupled to our ordinary physical body, we also possess dormant or latent sensory systems associated with it. Systems capable of interacting directly with dark sector particles or fields. This is dark sight.
But obviously we're not all seeing dark plasma entities constantly.
No, not in our normal waking state of consciousness,
Mm.
which is focused entirely on processing sensory input from the ordinary matter, body, and environment. Access to this dark sight, Alfred suggests, is easiest or most likely during non-ordinary states of consciousness, such as deep meditation, where awareness is withdrawn from external senses, or during the use of certain psychoactive compounds that alter brain function to potentially shift the locus of consciousness. Or in those transitional states between wakefulness and sleep hypnagogic or hypnopompic states, when the boundary between the ordinary and dark components might be more fluid, even during near-death experiences, as we discussed.
So in those states, the filter drops, and consciousness can potentially shift towards the dark plasma counterpart.
That's the idea, making direct perception of pure dark plasma phenomena, entities or structures that haven't generated an ordinary plasma sheath via dark ionization momentarily possible. It opens up a whole new avenue for potential observation, shifting from external technology to internal states of being.
Okay, let's try and pull all these threads together for the listener. This has been a lot to digest. Jay Alfred's inter-terrestrial hypothesis, underpinned by the dark plasma hypothesis. It fundamentally shifts the entire UAP discussion, doesn't it?
It really does. It moves it away from this almost mythical narrative of impossibly distant visitors crossing interstellar voids, which is fraught with logistical and motivational problems.
And brings it home. Literally. It reframes the phenomenon as potentially involving an interterrestrial civilization, or at least a complex, dark biosphere that is intrinsically tied to our own planet, physically coupled, gravitationally intertwined.
And the real strength of the DPH isn't just the core idea, it's the detailed scientific scaffolding Alfred builds around it. It's not just hand-waving. It offers concrete physical mechanisms.
Right. The existence of dark Earths, supported by neutrino data and resolving the mass conflation issue, solves the motive problem why they would care about us.
Then you have dark ionization, the pumping action, creating a temporary ordinary plasma sheath, combined with the plasma frequency gate, that explains the core observables, the sudden appearances, the instant disappearances, the changing shapes and reflectivity, the lights, the radar returns.
And absolutely critically, the experimental evidence, however tentative still, for the X-17 particle and its associated short-range fifth force that provides the missing piece, the plasma glue.
Exactly. It explains the efficiency of the interaction, making dark ionization plausible. And it explains the ordinary matter veneer, which accounts for the sensations of touch, the low-level impact sounds, and that momentary appearance of solidity that has puzzled people for so long.
It feels like a framework that can actually start to connect the dots, providing specific physics-based explanations for almost the entire range of anomalies, sensory, radar, acoustic, visual, even olfactory, that have been reported for decades, tying them all back to potentially understandable, if exotic, plasma physics happening right here in a coupled sector of reality.
Physics we are perhaps only now beginning to glimpse the edges of.
So the final implication here is, well, it's profound.
Yeah.
If these civilizations, or life forms in Earth's dark plasmaspheres, have potentially been thriving here for far longer than humans, and if they are intelligent, they must possess vastly advanced technologies, maybe governments, cultures, a whole reality parallel to ours.
And crucially, because of the gravitational coupling, their fate is inextricably tied to ours. They can't just pack up and leave if we wreck the planet. Our biosphere's health affects their environment too.
Which means, if we actually want to move beyond just collecting blurry photos and radar blips, if we want to genuinely understand and maybe even interact with this phenomenon more deeply, relying solely on our current tools, better radar, faster jets, sharper telescopes, might be missing the point.
Might be looking in the wrong place or with the wrong senses. Alfred ends with a really provocative thought, almost a challenge to the current UAP investigation paradigm. He suggests that if the primary mechanism for interaction, and perhaps even perception, is rooted in the dynamics of our own coupled dark plasma body and its dark site, then maybe the best tool for future UAP research isn't external technology at all.
So what then?
Perhaps the best advice for those dedicated UFO hunters, those serious investigators out there, is this. Forget the night vision goggles for a moment. Maybe. Take up meditation. Learn to access those non-ordinary states of consciousness. Try to activate the latent sensory system of your own alpha dark plasma body.
Wow. That's turning the entire scientific method inward, isn't it? A radical proposal for how to explore this ultimate mystery.
A radical proposal indeed, and definitely something for all of us to think about.